Environmental activist group Just Stop Oil were again protesting this week, walking slowly along London's busy streets to slow and obstruct traffic, demonstrating what is an increasingly common tactic used by such groups. Of the two interviews this week, the first is from Selby, where I met Shelly, while the second features Robert, originally from Canada, but who now lives in the UK, and who I interviewed in a park in the city of York. Here was Shelly's thoughts on Just Stop Oil's methods.
Yeah, I think they ultimately have a detrimental effect on the people's perception of them, or the general public's perception. I think what they're doing is it's hard because they've got to do. It feels like we've got to take action to make things happen because I don't think the government's invested enough in taking action. So you can understand their frustration, but I don't necessarily think that's the right way about going about it.
But if you believed, as these activists seem to, that this is going to have such world-altering consequences, don't you think disrupting a bit of traffic is perhaps a reasonable response to that?
Yes, in the grand scheme of things, it's easy to say that. However, people's self-worth, it will always be greater than the worth of a greater good. Mm-hmm. So people are very self-centred, and I use a term called the juggernaut of self, which means our own self-being is such a huge thing for us that it's easy for people to find that very disruptive for themselves because they're looking at it from their own point of view instead of thinking about the bigger picture. But yeah, as in answer to your question, I think it's not a big deal to disrupt a bit of traffic when there's bigger things need doing in the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. More broadly then, how serious do you think the issue of climate change is, and what do you think a reasonable response to it would be in terms of how to solve that problem?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of more broadly, this issue of climate change or global warming, whatever term you prefer, what do you think would be a reasonable response to it, and how serious of a problem do you think it is?
A reasonable response. I think there's global groups going on at the moment that, like, I forget the names of them now. They've just had a global summit, haven't they, for the climate?
The COP.
The COP, yes. So there's thank you. There's global groups going on like that, but I think they're just lip service. I think there should be a more concerted effort to actually make things happen. We know we're on the cusp of dangerous things happening for us on the planet. If we want to survive as a species, we need to start doing things like not now, but before now. It's almost too late to start now. So I think we need investment from the government. I'm not sure we'll get it from the Tory government because I don't think that's where their interests lie. I think as far as they're concerned, as long as they're good for us, as long as they're alive, that's all they care about. But I don't think parties like Green will get in, unfortunately.
Could I just push you then? You say you want more investment from government. Could I ask where that investment should go, in your opinion, if you've got a specific...
I said investment, not investment.
Oh, sorry.
So, yeah, no worries. But where should investment come from? I think it should come from taxpayers. We should be taxed.
And where should that go to, sorry? So what sort of ideas should that be fueling?
Oh, I don't know. So, I'm not an expert on climate control, but I think investment in infrastructure regarding, fossil fuels has a terrible impact, and it has for many years, as far as our carbon footprint is concerned. Things like farming has a terrible impact on the environment. I think there should be more awareness made for the wider public of kinder things for animals and for the environment as well, but there's just not enough awareness of it.
So with energy and farming, it's perhaps looking at cleaner alternatives to the current sort of setup?
Yeah, I think so. Cleaner alternatives. I think we should stop subsidising farming. I don't think keeping British farming going for British farming reasons it's not a good enough reason just to be subsidising that because we know that British farming's not profitable without subsidising, and it's almost like they're keeping it going just because the British people like the British things. So yeah, I think that's not a good enough reason to be damaging the planet.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
No problems.
And now here's Robert's perspective on Just Stop Oil's actions.
I think they're playing a very tricky game, really, and it's a very delicate balance between public support, which I think is probably silently quite huge, and the inconvenience caused. But my own view is that the emergency is an emergency, but actually our government and so many other agencies in particular haven't woken up to it. So I think it's a wake-up call, and in general I approve of it. I've just spent, funnily enough you should ask, the last half hour standing on Skeldergate Bridge here in York, just watching the river and also watching the traffic. And there's such a contradiction between how the river moves and how people move on the river, and the incredible pouring of traffic across the bridge. And of course here in York it's a big problem, both in terms of air quality and just in terms of quality of life and the pedestrian experience here. And I really worry about how the city is going to be tackling it, and I'm unconvinced that our leaders have taken it on fully. So to get back to your question, I mean, I think we have to use all tactics to get people to wake up to the fact that the planet's in huge danger, and actually we have to make change, and there's a great deal of opportunity in that change, I think.
So you said at the start though that it's a bit of a tricky balance, so do you think the action such as the disruption caused in London this week is maybe risks alienating some people who would otherwise support the cause, or do you think it's justified?
I think there is a risk. I think it is justified, and I think the risk probably has to be taken.
Perfect. So more broadly then, what do you think would be some sensible and reasonable solutions to climate change, which you clearly think is a pretty pressing issue? How would you go about solving that issue?
I think the important thing is that each of us in our lives can do small steps, but I do think the government has to show an immense amount of more leadership than it has so far, and I would welcome that, actually.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.